In ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 7 o'clock and I'm Martin Daubney in for Laurence Fox, who is convalescing. Get well soon. Well, the government has lost the plot on illegal immigration. The Prime Minister takes all the credit from the weather, but now it's getting warmer, the numbers are up. So I'll be asking whether it's time to follow Italy's example and declare a state of emergency. We'll also be posing the broader but crucial questions about social cohesion and multiculturalism. Dr. Rakib Ehsan joins us to discuss his new book, Beyond Grievance, What the Left Gets Wrong About Minorities. And it's been a tumultuous week in Westminster as the House of Commons braces itself to vote on Boris Johnson's fate on Monday. And I'll be asking, is this the end for Bozo? And a quick fire for the panel, just to wrap things up. Everything from ice cream van bans to pride in the firearms unit. You will not want to miss it. Well, that's all coming up after the news with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Martin. A man has been charged with the murders of 3 people in Nottingham's knife attacks. 31-year-old Valdo Kalokane, a former student of Nottingham University, is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates on Tuesday. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 other people were injured when they were hit by a van that morning. He's due to appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court tomorrow. Boris Johnson is accused of breaching ministerial rules by taking up a new role as a Daily Mail columnist. The Advisory Committee on Business Appointments claims Mr Johnson gave them just half an hour's notice. That's despite the ministerial code requiring those who have left the government in the last 2 years to apply for advice on taking up new appointments. Mr Johnson's first article is on how a weight loss drug didn't work well for him, saying he will only cover politics when he absolutely has to. The former Director General of the police watchdog has been charged with raping a girl under the age of 16. Michael Lockwood is accused of 6 counts of indecent assault and 3 counts of rape against the teenager. The Crown Prosecution Service says the 64-year-old allegedly committed the crimes during the 1980s. He left the Independent Office for Police Conduct in December after it emerged he was being investigated over a historical allegation. A hosepipe ban will be in place in Kent and Sussex from the 26th of June as a heatwave across the country continues. South East Water is imposing the ban as drinking water reaches record demand this month. Some households in the 2 counties have been without water since Monday due to supply issues. Rule breakers could find themselves hit with a £1,000 fine. King Charles has appointed Queen Camilla with the highest honour in Scotland. The Queen has been given the honour to the most ancient and most noble Order of the Thistle. That's a personal gift from the monarch that recognises 16 knights, along with a number of people who have held public office or have contributed to national life. It comes ahead of the King's first Trooping the Colour ceremony tomorrow to mark his official birthday. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Martin.
Well, this was the week when the Tory government finally and totally lost control. No, in fact, they lost the plot on illegal immigration. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak was acting all tough in an immigration control stab-proof fest, bragging about a 50% increase of raids and doubled arrests. Well, that followed his claim that his Stop the Boats plan had cut crossings by 20%. But anybody with half a brain and the ability to say, Alexa, what's the weather like in Dover, knew it was high winds, not high-minded Tory policies that was keeping the illegals away. That didn't stop Rishi. Part King Canute, part Comical Alley, he reassured us it was he and only he who could stop the tide. Yet it got worse. Today it emerged the Home Office spent a whopping £3.6 billion on asylum support in 2022-23, nearly double the year before. Astonishingly, Rishi has made things worse. His pledge to clear a backlog of nearly 100,000 old asylum claims has created a logjam of new claims. Yes, the lunatics have finally taken over our asylum system. But before you say, oh well, at least things can't get any worse, the answer is they can. A lot worse, if Labour get into power. Because like Rishi, Keir Starmer likes to talk tough on borders. But like Rishi, he'll be another chocolate teapot. Yvette Cooper, his shadow Home Secretary, is basically Gary Lineker in a wig. And most Labour MPs share her refugees welcome stance too. In February 2020, 53 Bleeding Heart MPs, including Labour luminaires at the time, Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, David Lammy and Nadia Whittome, succeeded in grounding a flight loaded with 43 foreign criminals about to be deported to Jamaica. 3 of those criminals went on to reoffend, including one, Ernesto Elliott, who brutally stabbed a man to death. Yet Miss Whittome called them vulnerable people, adding refugees need protection, not deportation. Whose side are these people on? Some 9,346 have crossed the channel illegally this year, including at least 1,500 this week and over 300 today. We have absolutely no idea who any of these people are. We now no longer know who walks among us. Of course, they're not all bad apples. Some may genuinely be fleeing war zones, but they could have claimed asylum in France. Mind you, you've been to Paris recently? But it's delusional and dangerous for the Linekerites to claim that they're all saints too. In April, security sources leaked to the Daily Mail revealed that there are at least 19 terrorists living at full taxpayers' expense, including Islamic State members who came here in dinghies. But this is likely to be just the tip of the iceberg. Surely it's time to cry, enough is enough. So how can we make Britain safe again? Well, we could declare a national state of emergency to stem the tide of illegals arriving here by dinghy. In April, Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni did just that. Boats filled with illegals were forced to dock in France. We could enforce existing UN Convention laws on national security and tow boats back to France. We could hold a referendum on the membership of the ECHR, new to the human rights lawyers, and deport all terrorists and foreign criminals. We could also even arm the police. But that, my friends, that would take guts. And we just don't have gutsy leaders like Giorgia Meloni in Britain. We have spineless Sunak, who shouts at the sea but cannot stop the tide, and a parliament, public service, judiciary and a mainstream media stuffed with refugees welcome virtual signallers who are completely out of touch with the public mood. Today we say it's time to declare a state of emergency. It's time to close our borders to illegals. It's time to make Britain safe again. So, tonight I'm asking, how do we make Britain safe again? Should we close the borders? Should we deport all foreign criminals? Should we even arm the police? Well, let me know what you think. Email the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet us, of course, @gbnews. So, keeping on that story, is it time to declare a state of emergency? Well, I'm joined now by the leader of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, an old sparring partner of mine over in Brussels. Well, we stuck it to them.
We certainly did, Martin. Good evening.
Good evening. Is it time to go full Maloney? Because I'm not seeing anything remotely changing, despite billions of pounds of extra money going into it, loads of hot air, loads of chest puffing, but no decisive action.
Look, of course, we should definitely declare that there is a national security threat, which we're entitled to do under Article 9 of the UN 51 Convention. We in Reform UK, we've been calling this for well over a year now. It's the first part of our six-point plan, and this is the only plan, and we are the only party, Martin, that will stop the boats. So that's the first thing you have to do. You then make it absolutely clear that zero are allowed to resettle here, that you will have offshore processing centres, but here's the rub. You've then got to say that you're going to have a completely new Department of Immigration, staffed by people who believe in the cause of safe and secure borders. That's absolutely fundamental. And then you do what the Australians did. You safely pick people up out of the boats and you take them back to France from where they came. Again, which you're allowed to do, Martin, under existing international law.
So the big question is, Richard, if we're allowed to do all of this, why don't we do it?
Because they are weak, they are feeble, they are gutless, they don't have the courage and the decisive leadership to actually do this and to protect British citizens. You've mentioned some examples there. Tragically, there are many, many more examples where asylum seekers who've either outstayed their right to stay or foreign criminals who haven't been deported, and every single foreign criminal should be deported the moment they leave prison, that they've then gone on to carry out hideous, violent and sometimes deadly crimes. And I think the British people actually have had enough and they want some action, but it does require guts. And there's no guts, frankly, within anywhere near the levers of power in the main two parties in Westminster.
OK, let's just have a bit of balance on that. So people would say, well, it's all fine to say we're going to declare, a state of emergency, but the lawyers won't stand for it. France won't stand for it.
They've got nowhere to go. It's in Article 9 of the UN 51 Convention. You're entitled to do it. Australia did it in 2013 as part of their plan, which is the basis of our plan, and guess what? It worked.
And that's because, just to clarify for viewers, that's so you declare there's a threat to your national security,
Correct.
which clearly there is if we know there are at least 19 terrorists within our country.
We know that. We know that dozens and dozens of others. For example, I'm the guy who exposed the Albanian scandal of people coming from a safe NATO country into their many, many thousands. And sadly, we know that many of those have gone on to commit crimes, join drug gangs, as exposed by the National Crime Agency. So look, yes, these people can say we're on top of it, but they're clearly not. The backlog is growing. The Home Office is utterly incompetent and it needs dealing with.
What about the money side of this? Because obviously we're spending like 6, 7, who knows how many £1 million a week on hotels alone.
A day.
A day, beg your pardon. And offshore processing is talked about a lot, but it's continually blocked by lawyers, but by the establishment, by the blob. And not a single person has left for Rwanda. So how would this work? Just say if you were Prime Minister, how would you be able to do what hasn't been able to be done by anybody so far?
The first thing is you've got to set up a new Department of Immigration, staffed by a completely new team who believe in the cause, with lawyers who believe in the cause as well. The moment you do that, then actually you're into a much better place. And you don't have to just use Rwanda. Although I was interested that countries like Germany, member of the European Union, is now looking at a Rwanda plan because they know they've got a problem. But we could also use British overseas territories, for example. There are a number of different places.
Faroe Islands, Falklands.
There's a number of different places.
What about building an island, like Boris proposed to build Boris Island for a runway?
Island. He wanted an airport.
Yeah, but what about building an island where we could put a containment centre?
We don't need to. We've got existing overseas territories. Or we can do arrangements with Rwanda. And let's remember, Rwanda was actually praised by UN reports for the progress and the help that it's been given in actually supporting refugees from other African countries.
What's the mood on the streets about where we're at the moment? Obviously, people are exasperated. Do you think we're reaching some sort of tipping point, some sort of point where the great British welcoming spirit, the tolerance, the diversity, the welcoming nature, are we seeing that getting stretched to the absolute limit now?
And that's the tragedy of it, because yes, we've always been a generous, welcoming, hospitable nation. And we proved it, didn't we, with Ukraine last year, women and children, not young men of military age. So we've always had that reputation. But that then becomes diluted or damaged, that generosity, because we're being abused, we're being exploited, we're being manipulated by so many people for money and for foot soldiers for these criminal gangs. And it's got to stop. And I think the mood of the British people is done with this.
Yeah.
We've had enough. You know, I spoke to one of these asylum seekers outside the hotel when they went on strike because they weren't happy with the quality of the bathrooms and the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and if you think about these floating barges, the so-called prison barges, they look better than a lot of holidays I've had. No, I've never afforded to get a cabin on a P&O ferry.
What a disgrace. British construction workers regularly use that same barge when building offshore wind turbines, for example, or other construction projects. What an absolute disgrace for people in Westminster to then say that's not good enough for the illegal asylum seekers, when British workers already use that very same barge.
Well, it's hard to argue with that. Richard Tice, thank you for joining us this evening. Leader of the Reform Party, of course. Well, let us know what you think out there. Some strong words there. Is it going too far? If we are risking having a bit of a trade war with France, is that a price worth paying? Let us know. Well, coming up, we'll be continuing on our reflections on what happened in Nottingham this week, as well as a broader look at social cohesion in Britain's communities. Author of Beyond Grievance, Dr. Ehsan, joins me after this break. Please stick around.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On
Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, my first on-air reaction to the witch hunt against Boris Johnson. I won't be pulling my punches and you won't want to miss it. We'll speak to the teacher who was almost fired by an ultra-woke school simply for teaching children the birds and the bees. My Mark Meets guest is acting legend Amanda Barry, star of the Carry On films and Coronation Street. Plus, in my take at 10, I'll be dealing with bumbling Joe Biden. And we've got the papers, my top pundits, and TV news legend John Sargent. We're live from 8.
Welcome back. I'm Martin Daubney, in for Laurence Fox. Well, like me, are you sick to the back teeth of identity politics? The notion that your skin colour should dictate the way you vote, or how you think, or how you even talk to your friends. Well, if so, you'll love our next guest, Dr. Ehsan, whose new book, Beyond Grievance, What the Left Gets Wrong About Ethnic Minorities, was published this week. Dr. Ehsan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Fabulous looking book. Very brave. You're speaking out about things that normally get people like you in a lot of hot water. Can we start with the notion of where did identity politics come from? I think it's because the liberal left realised the working classes were no more use to them, because they realised that capitalism was the way out, so they invented a new grievance system to divide and conquer. Anyway, that's enough of me white-splaining. What's your take?
Well, my take, Martin, is that, well, firstly, all the insults I've received over the book is very much waters off a duck's back, really. Yeah. I think that one thing that I really dislike about contemporary leftist politics is the fact that we're seeing this toxic racial identity politics being imported from the United States. And the argument I make in the book is actually that fragments the British working classes. And what I want to see, and I'm sure that what you'd like to see as well, Martin, is a mature Labour Party which represents the shared economic concerns and social grievances which tie together Britain's multiracial working classes. And I think at the moment, I feel that the Labour Party is looking too much to its ideological counterparts in the US, as opposed to focusing on the bread and butter issues in Britain today.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, I was a Labour Party voter for 20-odd years. I come from a very white working-class background, and I found people like me were hated by the party. I didn't leave the Labour Party. They left me. Back to the notion of people should vote along lines of their colour. There's this apprehension. You need to vote Labour if you're a black ethnic minority. It's nonsense, isn't it? We saw, for example, with the Brexit referendum, 40% of BAMEs, as they're called, voted for Brexit. More people voted for Brexit in London than voted for Sadiq Khan as London Mayor. How do we get out of this? Also in the States, this idea that you must vote for the Democrat Party if you're black. Kanye West, of course, causing a lot of trouble about that. How do we break this mentality?
It would be very difficult, Martin, because in some ways this mentality, this toxic mentality, has become embedded among elements of the British political left. And I think that is a serious problem, that people expect voters to subscribe to a particular set of liberal values purely on the basis of the colour of their skin. I think that kind of mentality has no place in a mature multiracial democracy. And I think what I argue for in the book, Martin, is actually the Labour Party needs to be more open to embracing the traditional triad of faith, family and flag. Many ethnic minority people in Britain do not see themselves as victims. They appreciate the opportunities, protections and freedoms afforded to them under British democracy. And if you see a number of social and economic metrics, you have a number of ethnic minority groups now outperforming the white British mainstream, which is precisely why I say that the left needs to do away with toxic white privilege theories which are being imported from the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that's music to my ears. I've been campaigning on white working class lads, in particular the bottom of education, for 25 straight years. The highest performers in Britain now are Indian and Chinese kids. So clearly there's no problems. One thing I love about your book, as well as identifying this problem we can all agree on, you've got some great solutions. One thing I absolutely love is this notion of a Family Stability Act. The notion of celebrating family, and you've got some eye-watering statistics there about the absolute explosion in the number of single-parent families in Britain. Tell us about that.
No, absolutely. And firstly, I'll make the point, Martin, I think that there's single mothers across the country. They do a fantastic job. And they serve their children to the best of their ability. But the reality is, what I'm talking about here is that there's certain family structures which are more strongly associated with positive youth outcomes, whether that's in education, cognitive development, mental well-being, and then further down the line, socioeconomic progress. And I think the point that I make in this book is that a stable two-parent home is that model, which is a couple, married couple, is actually the model which is most strongly associated with those positive youth outcomes. So the Labour Party, there's a great deal of talk within the Labour Party about introducing a new Race Equality Act, when actually I think that Britain, considering it's a major international hotspot when it comes to family breakdown, perhaps a better idea would be the introduction of a Family Stability Act. And that would include introducing family-friendly protections for British workers, promoting the institution of marriage within the tax system, which would bring Britain pretty much in line with much of Europe. And I think that we should maybe have a new government unit which really looks at the policy impacts on family stability, whether that's healthcare, housing, employment, or crime. I think that would be a really positive step in the right direction in terms of social policy.
I mean, these are old-fashioned conservative values in many senses, but how do we get around the fact? I mean, I actually heard David Lammy say something sensible once, it's true, in person. When the Lammy report came out, he did a fantastic section in that about the effect of fatherlessness on outcomes of education, all things you just mentioned. It was very quickly buried.
Absolutely.
Because it didn't sit well with a lot of Labour voters who might be single-parent families, who might be from ethnic minorities. How do you gel these progressive, sensible policies with a party that seems very resistant to that kind of thinking?
Well, the reality is that the Labour Party, there's a real shortage of moral political leadership on the British left. And I think that, of course, for example, when you look at serious controversy such as the Windrush scandal, they have to be addressed. And I think that that's done untold damage to institutional trust within communities of Black Caribbean origin. But saying that, I think one of the biggest problems facing Black Caribbean origin communities in the country is the fact that children of Black Caribbean origin, 63% live in lone parent households. That drops all the way down to 6% for their Indian heritage peers. And I think that's a big point I make in the book, is that that's precisely why I don't like the BAME acronym at all in the slightest, because there's some very serious differences between our ethnic minorities. And that in turn feeds into racial disparities that we see ranging from education to employment.
How damaging do you think identity politics has been to the fabric of Britain?
Oh, I think it's been hugely damaging. I think that the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that it very much threatened to set back race relations as opposed to improving them in this country. I took a lot of flack when I criticised BLM following the police killing of George Floyd in the US state of Minnesota. But the reality is that if people truly care about young Black lives in Britain, especially in London, they'll talk a lot more about family structure. They will talk more about fatherlessness, because in the absence of a responsible work male role model in the household, then young boys will seek that sense of belonging and rootedness elsewhere. And unfortunately, that may well come in the form of gang membership. And it ultimately, being a member of a gang significantly heightens a young person's involvement in criminal activity. Now, these are very sensitive issues, and they are difficult conversations to be had. But if we don't have them, we're doing many young people in our country a fundamental disservice.
OK, Rakib, you're speaking acres and acres of common sense. Thank you very much. You'll never catch on. Well, I hope it does. Thank you very much. The book is out now. Beyond Grievance, What the Left Gets Wrong About Ethnic Minorities. Well, coming up, it's the other defining story of the week. Of course, Boris Johnson has resigned as an MP, and the Partygate inquiry was published just yesterday. We'll be asking our panel next, could this be the end for Boris Johnson after this break?
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. I'm Martin Daubney, in for Laurence Fox. Well, I asked you earlier, how do we make Britain safe again? Should we close the borders, deport all foreign criminals? Should we even arm the police? Well, you've been getting in touch with your thoughts in your droves. First off is Martin, not me. We should declare a state of emergency on our borders and temporarily close them and completely ignore the ECHR. But as you highlighted, Martin, the current Cabinet and Labour are terrified of any criticism and will not take the decisive action required. Next point from Tez, who says most of our country's problems are being copied from America. It's time we stood up for ourselves. Hear, hear. Next point from Nina. Rishi is a gutless, weak Prime Minister. Nina, speak your mind freely, a bit more next time. Who wasn't voted into that position in the first place. We need a leader who will take action and not let off hot air. And on the topic of Boris, Morris says, Boris is being bullied by Parliament. By any definition, constantly picking on somebody is bullying. Well, that's your thoughts. It's been quite an eventful week in Westminster. Some laughter to my left and right. Our panel's about to kick in because just hours before Boris Johnson resigned as an MP last week, his resignation honours were published, which led to a public squabble between the former and current Prime Minister. Then, when Boris did resign, he publicly lambasted the Privileges Committee for what he deemed to be a witch hunt and a kangaroo court. The public were left teetering on the edge of their seats, awaiting the publication of that report, with delays setting in as a result of printing problems, of all things. And finally, just yesterday, the report was published and it had recommended a suspension of 90 days, a sanction well past the threshold of 10 days that could have allowed Boris's constituents to trigger a by-election if a majority in Parliament had approved it. Well, none of that matters now because he's resigned, of course, but Parliament will vote on Monday irrespective on whether to back the report's recommendations, which also include permanently removing Boris's parliamentary pass. All of this poses much broader questions, the most crucial of which is this the end for Boris Johnson? Well, joining me now to hopefully answer this question is the former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, and the political commentator, Benjamin Loughnane. So hello to you both. Let's start with you, Paul, because you were sniggering away there. Has Boris been unfairly treated by a kangaroo court, or is he a coward that deserted the battlefield? And it's not even over for him, because guess what? He just landed a whopping, massive new column with the Daily Mail.
I was just reading his column in the Daily Mail, which doesn't include, unless they're holding something back, any politics. It's all about his battle, to find a wonder drug to lose weight, and it's full of references to Brutus and Cassius. But I had a sort of... No, I don't think I'm not sure about whether 90 days was in order anyway, but he deserved what he got. And I'm sure that the 90 days came about as a result of his... I thought he was morphing into Donald Trump, actually, with kangaroo courts, and stitch-ups. And, it was quite extraordinary. And I think Monday, of course, is his 59th birthday. Well, he won't be there, of course, but the Commons will be voting. I had a strange dream last night. I imagined that Nadine Dorries, who, of course, missed out on her Boris planned knighthood, would jump up, break parliamentary code and sing happy birthday to the absent Boris. But maybe that's just my illusion.
Yeah, well, I mean, for starters, where do you go from that dream? For starters, I think he should ask for a refund on his weight loss drugs, because they don't seem to have worked. But on a serious note, Benjamin, has he been, right royally stitched up? Because everyone, this exit has allowed him, hasn't it? That wiggle room. Well, it was all a stitch up. I had to fall on my sword first. But has he really just deserted the battlefield?
Well, I think he's done things wrong. He certainly needs to be punished for how he was in office when he was Prime Minister. I think he made some key mistakes. But I don't think what he's being done for now is, ramping up immigration, locking up the entire country. We now know, with the adverse effects that came from it, was probably the wrong decision. He did make mistakes in office, but they don't seem to be investigating that. They're investigating cakes and birthday parties. I think, Boris has a point in the sense that he's being done over tiny little peccadillos, but in reality, he has actually done quite a lot wrong.
I wonder, actually, if he's going to be, happy about the fact he's got a newspaper gig now. In fact, we've got a short video here we can play of Boris accepting this gig, and he caused another kerfuffle because he didn't tell Parliament until half an hour before. Check this out.
Hi folks, Boris Johnson here. I am thrilled to be asked to contribute a column to the Daily Mail, and I can tell you, readers of the Daily Mail, that it is going to be exactly what I think about the world. It is going to be completely unexpurgated stuff. I'm going to be writing whatever I want. I may even have to cover politics from time to time, but I'll obviously try to do that as little as possible, unless I absolutely have to. And I'm much looking forward to making my first contribution to those illustrious pages on Saturday. Join me in the Daily Mail on Saturday. All right, that'll do. Fine.
Well, there we go. That's Boris being Boris. It's worth pointing out, of course, Paul, that the Parliamentary Standards Committee said that Boris has breached rules by not consulting them before he just took the gig. But as a former newspaper man, you have to admit that Boris having a column in the Mail is a good fit. And he will be able to lob grenades at the Tory party from the sidelines and cause absolute bedlam.
Yes. Elsewhere this morning, I said he'd been, the Mail had given him a sniper's nest with which he could actually pepper Richie Sunak whenever he wanted. But he has to be very careful, because there are a growing number of Tory MPs, even Boris admirers, who are now tiring of the damage he is doing to the Tory party. And even there was a recent, in the last few days, a study done which suggested that about 40 or 50% of Tory party members now feel he's going too far with his attacks. I mean, funny enough, I'm the co-author of a book that came out late last year on Boris called Boris Johnson, Media Creation, Media Clown and Media Casualty, which I predicted he'd end up writing a Daily Mail column. But, of course, Paul Dacre's very close to him, and today's Daily Mail, for example, is page after page after page of supporting Boris.
Yeah, it's going to bring Benjamin. It's absolutely true that Little John did a column today saying it wasn't a kangaroo court, it was a lynch mob, and you thought, that's a bit fruity, even for the Mail. And now, of course, they were paving the way for an announcement they knew was coming. But this is classic Boris, isn't it? He'll be able to be floral, he'll be able to be mischievous, and it will be, whether you like him or not, it'll be an unmissable read.
Yeah, I think he's found his calling here. You know, he's much better as a columnist than as Prime Minister. Certainly, I think
That's definitely true.
far better suited to this. I've always said about Boris, he's a diagnostician of genius but a terrible doctor. He can say what's wrong, he can point out the problems, but he doesn't have the solutions. So I think he was a bit out of place in number 10 because he got there and then he didn't know what to do with it. It's what he wanted the whole time, to be Prime Minister, and once he got it, he effectively did nothing of any value. So I think he's much better off in the Mail than in number 10.
Do you think, talking about this kind of Lazarus-style comeback, you know, a Churchillian return to the battlefield, is a newspaper column an effective and robust and clever way of keeping himself relevant, or is it just simply over for Boris? Politically, can there ever be a comeback?
It certainly helped him secure, first of all, the London mayor role, and of course it played a part in him becoming Prime Minister. Let's not forget that Boris, although he won the 2019 election, he was anointed Prime Minister by the Tory party membership and MPs. But Boris is dangerous, and he deserves to depart the political stage for good. But someone who's known Boris for over 25 years and a few encounters with him, I think he still harbours those comeback, those Churchillian comeback ambitions, and I wouldn't totally rule it out. I think it's becoming increasingly unlikely, but it could happen. But the way the Mail have handled this has been very clever. Yeah. Because quitting at half an hour's notice or notifying the advisory...
it creates a huge PR moment, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, there's even a scandal about the way he accepted the job and the way he announced the job. It's the best kind of banging of the drum for people to go and read this that they can possibly be. Boris won't care about offending the Standards Committee, will he? He won't care about all of this. He's already in the outroute.
It's an advisory panel. The key word is advisory. One ex-minister told me it's like being slapped on the little toe with a wet lettuce.
OK, we'll have to move on now. We can all talk about Boris all night, but we have to move on. Thank you to my panel. Coming up, we'll be covering everything from inclusion, diversity and equality coordinators at Specialist Firearms Command to the freezing hours of ice cream vans by a Killjoy London council. And don't forget the terrible news coming home from America. Meghan Markle's podcast has just been axed after just one season. I'm in mourning. See you after this short break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of rumors. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, we're being read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm Martin Daubney in for the legendary Laurence Fox. Well, figures for last year show British police forces spent a whopping 66 grand on rainbow-themed merchandise, including flags, selfie frames, whistles, key rings, shoelaces, pens and lip balm. The list goes on. For Pride, of course. Lest we forget the Pride Macarena too, as you can see here. Absolute disgrace. Well, this week, Essex Police even threw a Pride in Our Kids event at their HQ. Again, on your tuppence. Resplendent with a drag queen, of course, which isn't at all creepy, is it? All the while, only 6% of burglaries get solved in Blighty. 30,000 muggings went unsolved last year alone. Meanwhile, cops have recorded over 120,000 non-crime hate incidents, such as people getting offended over being misgendered or using the wrong pronouns. Well, it's good to see they've got their priorities in order, isn't it? So tonight, we wanted to ask, is it time we kick this PC pride nonsense out of the force? Well, let's go to the panel. So what do you reckon? Let's start with you, Benjamin. I just get sick of it every year. It almost feels like pride is compulsory now. Yeah. If you're against it, you're an immediate homophobe. But isn't the issue is that at its heart, pride is a political movement?
It is a political movement, and no political movement has any place within the police. The police should be impartial. They should be seen as being a force which is there to govern and to protect, not going out and virtue signalling about social issues. It's not their place. Those police officers can do it in their private time if they want to, but not in uniform. Frankly, I think it's a disgrace and also a massive waste of taxpayer money.
Paul, surely those is good for inclusion and diversity.
I haven't got a great problem with it. I think it's being overdone, and that's from somebody who's on the Liberal left. But I think sometimes it actually looks a little ridiculous. But the principle is fine. But if you overdo it, it actually alienates people. I think you've got to strike the right balance. Some forces do, some forces don't. But it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario.
But we were talking earlier, Benjamin, about the kind of cancer of identity politics, and it basically makes you take sides. Yeah. It's like if you don't like pride, then you're an outright you're transphobe. No, I'm not. I just don't want blokes in wigs dancing the YMCA. I'd rather you just crack skulls and nick people who are robbing my house.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got a job to do. They should be doing their job. But I think it also undermines their authority. When you see a police officer in full uniform twerking and blowing whistles at a parade, it doesn't exactly project an image of strength and maturity. It looks a bit silly. I just think, frankly, the police should focus on their jobs because at the moment, they're not doing their actual job. They're just spending too much time on all these sideshows.
But one thing you have to bear in mind is, to a degree, it's countering the damage done by the sort of scandals that the Louise Casey report revealed. And also, you know, someone was arguing the case earlier on for arming more policemen. Well, let's not forget that both Wayne Couzens and David Carrick were members, you know, of the armed police brigade, you know, so to that extent we've got to be very careful. So I think trying to find that balance between, if you like, being a tolerant part of society and also being a efficient and competent police force is quite a tricky tightrope at the moment to walk. Public confidence isn't.
But at an operational level, though, I mean, if a police officer is favouring, say, I don't know, someone with ZM pronouns, or favouring, I mean, are they going to not taser a trans person if they're on a rampage? I just think it goes against the notion of policing without fear or favour, which used to be at the very heart of the constabulary, and now they've taken sides.
Absolutely, but also there's now the idea that if you don't go along with it, you don't join in, you'll be sidelined within the force. So it's the coercion within. You know, when you have these political movements, it's if you don't take part, you're not part of the club.
Okay, we got.
I think that's.
Martin, where do you get the idea that that if a trans person were behaving in a publicly threatening way, that they wouldn't be tasered? I don't see that would be the case.
Well, that's good for you. Let's move on to the next debate. That was feisty. If, like me, you've been enjoying the hot weather but fancied a cool down with a Mr. Whippy, well, you better not find yourself anywhere near Greenwich in south-east London, because the local council, in its mighty wisdom and killjoy spirit, has proposed banning ice cream vans on King William Walk by Greenwich Park and the Royal Observatory. You know, the exact sort of place you'd like to have an ice cream. The reasons being, apparently, that ice cream vans cause unacceptable levels of nuisance. They clutter views of the local attractions and have a negative impact on air quality. That's because they leave the motor running to power the generator. Well, I know where I won't be going this summer. Benjamin, they're banning everything.
Yeah.
Now they're banning ice cream vans during a heat wave. Morons?
It's ridiculous. It's like Cromwellian levels of destroying people's fun. You're not allowed to do anything you might enjoy. You have to sit at home, lock yourself in a dark room, and try not to breathe too much in case you emit too much carbon. They just are absolutely bonkers, these people.
Is that the answer, Paul? Stop breathing and don't have an ice cream?
Frankly, Greenwich Council are proving they're A, not very cool, and B, that they're a bunch of flakes.
I like that. I like a nice ice cream pun to end. Classic. Meghan Markle is the next one. So now, sweet viewers, some really troubling news broke early today from the pond. In fact, panellists, can we join hands and pray?
Right.
Kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. I can sense your pain. Israel.
So much.
Because guess what?
So much.
Meghan Markle's podcast, Archetypes, has been axed after just one season, owing to the fact that the Duchess's production company's low output of content, which is probably down to systemic racism or something like that. Anyhow, the X series claimed to explore labels that try to hold women back, an issue that clearly never happened to the multi-millionaire princess. So, panel, are you as surprised and saddened as me that Meghan's had the royal heave-ho? Let's start with you, Benjamin.
To be completely honest, I didn't even know she had a podcast, but actually she didn't. She didn't create any podcasts. That was the problem. They signed her up, they paid her loads of money, and I think she did about, 2 episodes?
I think she did one series, which I think was about 3 or 4.
3 or 4 episodes. I mean, what was she paid? Millions to do this. It was a stupid idea to commission this in the first place, but when she actually got the commission, she should have done the work. I mean, it just goes to show how entitled she is.
Do you think it's just a simple case of here we have somebody who actually is proof that the royal family isn't racist, because she was welcomed in with open arms. She's a globetrotter who lectures us about climate change. She hasn't been held back as a woman of colour. She hasn't been held back as a woman at all. She's a princess, which is the opposite of feminism. Yet she still bangs on about everything, and people just don't want to listen to that sort of tripe.
I've been studying some of the American entertainment magazines and websites today, and it's a mixed story, this, because you could have a cheap pun. You could say that Archwell isn't doing very well, but of course the whole company there, in fact, is doing badly. They're about they're about to lay off about 200 employees, and some reports are suggesting that she's already in negotiation with another outlet. So although it's quite, the statement says it was a joint decision. Who knows? But I suspect that she has other plans now. Whether she deserves the accolades she's been given recently, which I think is all about PR spin for various sponsors. So I'm not the biggest critic of Meghan Markle, but I'm also not a cheerleader either, because there's a lot of hypocrisy involved.
Yeah. Benjamin, let's move on to you. So, I mean, Is this just inevitable? Is this actually faith in humanity restored? And has Meghan's presence been toxic to the whole platform of Spotify? Is she the embodiment of go woke, go broke?
I think one of the biggest enemies of the woke movement is the market. That's why they're all communists, because as soon as they have their organisations and their plans and the things that they do, and no one buys it, like Bud Light, we saw got absolutely demolished by the boycott when they attempted a similar thing. You know, the problem is when people can vote with their wallets, they don't vote for the woke stuff. Every single time they go bust.
I think it's superb. Do you think then we're seeing a great realignment? Do you think do you think Meghan's departure actually signifies a great moment of hope rather than a moment of sadness?
Well, I think she's about to revive her actually successful before she even met Prince Harry website in a bid to challenge Gwyneth Paltrow. We'll see how that goes.
OK, superb. Thank you to my panel, Paul and Benjamin. It's been superb. Thank you. To you at home too. Up next is Mark Dolan, the legend. Mark, what's going on the show tonight, mate?
Martin, brilliant stuff. Well, we've got a very busy show at 9 o'clock. In my big opinion, I'll be reacting to the bombshell news that Boris Johnson is going to have a Daily Mail column. Will he use it to help or hinder Rishi Sunak? Plus, in my take at 10, my thoughts about Joe Biden. It's a painful truth that this man needs to be put out to pasture. America deserves better. The world deserves better. A really busy show, lots to get through. But first, the weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your evening weather forecast for GB News provided by the Met Office. Whilst high pressure has been with us throughout the past few days, it's low pressure that is increasingly becoming in charge as we head into the weekend. It's currently out in the Atlantic, it's steadily progressing in from the west and will be staying with us throughout the weekend and into next week as well. It's already fringing into parts of the west and bringing in these showers that will start to feed their way in throughout the rest of this evening and overnight. Could see some heavy rain in there, particularly for Northern Ireland through the early hours of Saturday morning, quite persistent rain. Generally further east though, it will stay drier and clearer, and underneath those clearer skies, temperatures dropping down into 10-11 degrees Celsius, so a bit more comfortable for sleeping here, but further towards the west around 15-16 degrees Celsius, so still quite muggy out there first thing on Saturday. Those showers then continuing to push their way north and westward, so a sprinkling perhaps for parts of northwest England, western Scotland, and we might see the odd one push across southern areas of England as well. Generally eastern areas tending to stay drier, and again we'll see a bit of wispy cloud push its way through, and with that cloud temperatures perhaps a little lower compared to recent days, but still feeling very warm, highs of 24-25 degrees Celsius. Into Saturday night, again continuing to see those showers, particularly across western areas, so western Scotland, northwest England, parts of Northern Ireland, still seeing a few filtering through. As we head into the daytime, though, those showers will be turning more widespread, and there is a thunderstorm warning in force for parts of England and Wales throughout the day. These thunderstorms are going to be hit and miss, though. Not everywhere is going to see one, but where you do see them, they are going to be potentially bringing heavy downpours of rain, hail and even some lightning as well. This area of low pressure is staying with us then as we head into Monday and Tuesday. Further thunderstorms and heavy showers are likely throughout those days as well, so do keep up to date with the forecast because it is quite a showery picture on the cards. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot